Hi everyone, and welcome to the second episode that we're doing of these Sunday conversations. Last time went really well. We enjoyed the feedback, and so with everything still boiling over, we wanted to continue with the topics. It's got a similar panel this week. My dad's not here, fortunately, on Father's Day, which is pretty ironic, but we still have Michael, Louise, and Jerome back to talk about recent events. So I think this week, obviously, this all started from the George Floyd death and then the consequent riots. But I think this week, obviously, we've had the Rashard Brooks killing. And that brought up a lot of controversy because obviously it was not as black and white. I think what we got with the George Floyd death was quite unanimous and explicit video. There was no real left or right of it. But I think this has had a lot of other elements of, okay, this is a completely different police incident. Are we still looking at it through the George Floyd lens? Are we being objective in every case from now? And I think that's an important thing to touch on. I think we've got some varied points of view in this group. So that'll be interesting to talk about. Also, I think Candace Owens, to name a particular person, has been in the news recently, whether that's been through debates or her Brexit movement, which we touched on in the last conversation, to do with the left and right and who's really behind this Black Lives Matter movement, which I think, again, we all have some opinions on. And so I think those are kind of be the two more relevant topics of baseball today, but the conversation can flow any way it may do. So do we all want to say our piece on the most recent killing and say where we believe agency lied, what we thought about the media's kind of reaction and people's reaction to it? So Louise, would you like to start?
I think they should have just let him go. And because they had all his details, I think they should have just let him go and then arrested him later. I don't think he was a danger to anyone around him. And I think the fact that the police shot another car means that they took it out of proportion.
Right. Would anybody else like to say something contrary to that or build on that at all?
Go on, Jerome. You can go.
I don't know. I just think the idea of saying we're going to let him go because he's running away is a kind of so what happens? You arrest him later. He was resisting arrest because he didn't want to get arrested. So are we assuming that he's just going to be happy to be arrested later on when they go and collect him? Like the role of the police is to protect the public. If you're trying to arrest someone, it's because you're trying to remove them from public. So the idea of just letting them go because they've managed to get a certain distance away from you, I don't really think makes much sense. I think, you have all the details, but the point is you're trying to arrest somebody. So I don't really understand how how you can carry that on into everything else. It's a confusing one for me. I don't think anyone would argue that he deserved to die. There's no, no one rational anyway. I think the point is once you go from somebody who is driving under the influence to somebody who's an assaulting a police officer, taking a weapon from them and then attempting to use it on them, fair bit, albeit in the attempt to get away, it does change the context of why that force was used. Now, you can argue that, any time a gun is used, it's an unfortunate situation. But, the sad reality is that guns are a thing in American culture. And that's the kind of outcome of an interaction like that. I don't think the police officer left his house being like, you know what, it'd be quite good if I could shoot someone today. And I don't think he was probably going home thinking that he was happy that he'd done it. I just think we do have to apply the nuance of that in that situation, in the heat of the moment, things like that happen. And, the fact that he hit another car was, there are arguments to be made about the levels of police training and, but I don't think that they translate to this guy being, having his whole reputation tarnished. Everyone's saying that it basically was a racially charged murder or just a action of police brutality, just because the current narrative, it is pushing everything in that direction.
Yeah, so I would say, obviously, I need to go back to the event. So obviously, this guy was blocking the driveway in Wendy's, of all places, and police officer comes round, tries to wake him up, isn't able to wake him up, opens the door, then obviously questions him. Everything seems okay. Calls for backup, obviously seeing that this guy's under some sort of influence. And after, I think it's 40 minutes of checking out this guy, they're like, okay, this guy's been drinking or whatever it is. Now, number one, obviously the guy shouldn't have been sleeping there in the first place. You know, it's such an awkward place to position your car. So he's been a nuisance in that sense. We don't know where he's been before or after. He claims that he's going to his daughter's birthday or something like that. And so him trying to resist arrest obviously caused some sort of aggravation anyway. Is it right to resist arrest? What's right or wrong in this? Do you know what I mean? Obviously, you know, many people would say you should just comply with the law, just be sort of like docile in that sense and go along with it. For whatever reason, he decided not to. Now, there's an important fact to be made here. They did check, the original officer at the beginning, checked to see if he had a weapon. He didn't have a weapon. He didn't have a weapon on him. That's an important fact. So there was no danger in that sense. Now, yes, he did punch the second officer in the face, unwarranted, okay, not needed. And he did obviously he took off the taser and, you know, aimed it at the guy. But according, and I don't know how true this is, according to the lawyer who's defending the guy, obviously, who died, Rashard, he knew that the taser wasn't working anyway, or something like that. It wasn't loaded or something like that. I don't know how true that is, but this is based on BBC News. We can't put too much weight on that, but taser versus a gun, two different stories. 3 bullets fired. If you're trained effectively, shoot him in the leg. Shoot him somewhere where he's not necessarily going to continue to move. But where it was directed wasn't in a place where it was just to slow him down or whatever it is. Now, I agree with Jerome in a sense that it's fucked up they have guns in that country anyway. That's part of the problem. But then it comes down to the user. Are you blaming the tools and not the user? What happens in that instance? Am I supporting the fact that he should have run off? Well, why didn't the police officers just chase him? Good old, you know, cops and robbers sort of thing. I don't support the killing, and I'm calling it a killing for a reason, but I don't support what Rashard did before. Was it racially sort of engineered? That's a really deep and philosophical question. How do you know if something's racially sort of engineered unless it's overt? How do you actually know that? So I don't think you can be quick to say it was racial. If anything, in my opinion, it was a mistake to shoot. Whether it's to kill or not is a different story, but it would appear that was the intention, so to speak.
Right.
Can I just quickly,
have something to add?
I think the officer, what he did was based out of fear. Like, shooting him 3 times means he wasn't really thinking. It was just like a quick reaction. Let me just, you know, put him down. Like, exactly, he could have shot him in the leg. He could have shot him in a place where it would just disarm him instead of killing him. And I just think, like, this is just another example of police brutality. And I know it may be weird to use the example of the UK, but like, they checked him for a weapon, right? And he didn't have one. In the UK, if that was the case, an officer couldn't get a gun out of their holster and shoot them. They would have just chased them or arrested them later. And that would happen in every single case here, and no one would die.
The thing is, the reality is it's you can't make the comparison between the UK and the US, because, you know, you have to be kind of like, what is the argument going to lead to in the outcome? Like, so, and the first thing I was just suggest is the idea of calling it police brutality. I think we actually need to be a bit more nuanced to that and say, here's an example of police not being trained properly to de-escalate situations and not having the appropriate training to react well under pressure. And, you know, I think that's where this example should lead us narratively and how we can have productive conversations. You know, if we have this reactionary, this is an example of police brutality, police are the worst thing in the world, you know, then you start to qualify defund the police, you know, or, you know, or, you know, because there are people who actually do think that that is a plausible response to this sort of thing. And it is ridiculous. It is fundamentally ridiculous to think that getting rid of police is going to solve a problem in terms of crime. It just doesn't make any sense, you know. And I think that in Germany, the police have to go through stringent testings of de-escalating situations. There's a lot of training involved. In the UK, we have no choice because we have no weapons that we can use. And so the UK are well renowned for having de-escalation as their kind of first tool. Yeah, but America don't have that. And this is an example of where that sort of thing should be invested in. And it's an example of that. I just think, to me, that's a more nuanced argument than going, this is an example of police brutality, police are brutal. It's a much more inflammatory conclusion than the reality. And I think we need to actually try and look at these things without emotion and to try and be pragmatic in our response. And, all I'm seeing in the reactions and the kind of the descriptions of all of these things are just inflammatory emotional responses, which then result in ridiculous kind of solutions to these. I have not heard one idea to kind of really justify the idea that you're going to defund the police, because I've heard people saying, let's take their guns away. Well, then what will happen is, because there are more guns than people in America, you will get police being shot en masse, because if someone doesn't want to get arrested and they have a gun in the car, they're going to shoot people. Police die quite often, for doing routine traffic stops and then getting shot from inside the car, and are we going to ignore that? Are we going to start marching the streets saying Blue Lives Matter when we see a string of police people getting killed? We need to be consistent in kind of our responses, and remove emotion from it, because otherwise you're just not going to get anything sensible that comes from this. And I think that's kind of what we're seeing at the moment. We're getting people putting down statues because they want to, respond to racism. Like, what does that do? What does that do? Sorry, go on, Michael.
No worries, man. No, I definitely hear what you're saying. All I'd say to that, and I hear what you're saying in terms of comparisons. And I do agree with the fact that, there needs to be some sort of inquiry, investigations, changes, whatever it is, in terms of understanding how to be better at de-escalation within the States. But whether he was, we're talking about emotion here, but if we're going based on Louise's point of him being emotional, being in fear, it still doesn't change what had happened. Mm. He still killed someone. And the question is, was it warranted or not? In the eyes of the law, currently right now, it wasn't warranted. And it's trying to work backwards and see, okay, how can we prevent things like this happening in the future under similar circumstances? Bearing in mind, there are so many different variables that police need to deal with. And obviously there are variables that the people under arrest, whether they're actually guilty or not, need to deal with mentally as well. I think everything, it was a difficult one, but I don't think he needed to be killed. I really don't.
So can I add something to that?
Go ahead.
I think if we frame the question as, should he be killed, or should have been a lesser sort of, what should have been done about it? I don't think it's a question of his life been lost. I think, but that doesn't necessarily mean he shouldn't be shot in that situation where, okay, he's running away, right? If you only have a gun and he's already shown the ability to threaten your life, your fellow officer's life, and presumably people on the road's life with his drink driving, if that was indeed what he was doing, then for me, he's shown himself to be somebody who's reckless with life. So if he gets away and you don't shoot him because you no longer have your taser that's been taken off of you, he's at a distance that you feel like you can't catch him, which I'm not necessarily saying is true, but if that's what you're assessing from the situation, then it becomes a case of the only alternative I have is let him go or take his life, not take his life or arrest him or, tase him or whatever situation you might have had at the beginning of the situation. And so for me, then it becomes, if you genuinely believe that he is a danger to others in a space of time that it's going to take to between now and to arrest him further down the line, is that the bigger factor in terms of, is it worth risking, or in fact, if it was their intention, taking his life? That's how I phrase it more in my own mind.
I feel like there's a flaw with that, in a sense that there is this, based on what you're saying, there's a fundamental belief that they're thinking about other people's lives and their lives. It may have been an ego thing. It could have been, you think you're getting away. Apparently, Mr. Rolfe said, got him. That was on the thing, got him. So it may have been an ego thing. So I think sometimes we need to be careful about the stance in which we're presenting these police officers as well, Mm-hmm. So I think the difficulty about this is the quality of intent here. What was his intention? Yes, to some degree, it was to stop him, but how badly did he want to stop him? Obviously, he's killed him, but was that the intent? That's the difficulty of assessing this. The fact that the law has said that, you know, he's committed a murder, whatever it is, in their eyes, they felt like there was an alternative solution. So it'd be quite interesting to see what the law says in terms of what some of the alternative solutions are, or what the police department says in terms of that. That's what I'd be interested to see.
Mm-hmm. Fair enough.
Can I just ask if you make the claim, shoot him in the leg, yeah, which I think, you know, we have to assume that police probably when they learn to shoot, they're taught to shoot the center mass, which is kind of like, it's the easiest way to guarantee you're going to hit someone. So I think that, you know, there are kind of questions on how people get trained to do that, which is because that's a degree of accuracy that you have to have in order to do that. But if he then shoots him in the leg and he dies.
Yeah, I was thinking about that. Yeah, that's a good question. Well, if you're shooting someone in the leg, it's different from shooting them at center mass. The intention is different. It's much clearer, you know, in that sense. And, you know, in terms of like when it came to sort of the calling the ambulance and everything else, and again, I'm going to say apparently there was a delay in terms of calling the ambulance and everything else. Now, it could be down to this fear thing, but this comes back to what you were saying about training, conditioning, really making sure people are equipped in certain situations. It's like what I think it was Joe Willink was saying, and I think it was the video that, he explained it really well. If they're only getting like 4 hours of training a year on this stuff, what? Like, how do you expect them to do all of this stuff, live life, and then if they have certain apparent biases, racially charged or not, how are they going to do the job effectively in that sense? Yeah, so it's a flawed system in that way.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I agree that, you know, and I think that's kind of the point in terms of when I challenge the way that this is looked upon, because, you know, could things have been done differently? Yes. Yeah. Like, you know, is it an example of police just having an undercurrent of just brutality? I don't think so. I think it's an undercurrent of being incompetent. There's an incompetence that runs through police that we need to address by kind of like actually, you know, coming to terms with it, accepting it, and then trying to tackle it in a pragmatic way. And you know, that guy reacted under pressure. You know, he sees a taser pointed at him, he pulls his gun, he puts the guy down. Now, you know, that's an example of an individual panicking and knowing that you can fall back to your kind of, you know, easiest kind of way of de-escalating the situation in your eyes, and that's pulling the trigger of a gun. You know, is it the best way? No, you know, but it is a option, and I just don't think. I think we have to be careful when we're so quick to just define it as a kind of police brutality, rather than saying, you know, there are steps of incompetence that just kind of manifested themselves in a guy losing his life. You know, and we have to acknowledge the agency of a lot of those variables occurred because this guy resisted arrest, assaulted a person, punched him to the ground, and took his weapon. And those things have to be considered in the response that then occurred from the other guy. Like these two, you know, human beings, all with flaws, you know, and one of them has a gun. You know, things like that end badly a lot of the time. You know, you know, that's the harsh reality of a country that is full of guns.
Can I just
Louise,
add,
you had something to add.
We have to think about what these police officers think in terms of consequences. As in, it's interesting to think whether the police officer in his mind thought, if I shoot him, can I get away with it? Like, what are the, you know, previous examples? Am I just gonna go back to the precinct, write it up as, you know, lawful, like, you know, I don't know how it works, but they just write up as it had to be done. I know they have their body cams and that gets looked at later, but yeah, we just have to look at previous examples and think, did he think that he would just get away with it and it was fine? And you know, did he look at examples before and think, yeah, this is what I'm meant to do in these sort of situations, and nothing will happen to me after? Like, because there's a certain, like, there's a way that he would feel bad about it, And that's what I'm wondering.
Yeah, I mean, so you're saying, like, do you think that he did it because he thought, I can get away with this, so this is just something that I can do? But I don't think people even. I think in the short time that this occurred, you have to remember this is like over a span of like 5 seconds. I don't think people really are sitting back and reflecting. They're reacting on instinct. That's the point. This is when you're not trained well to react on instinct. That's why in the army they drill you on things all the time, so that you become more control of like instinctive reactions, and so you can respond efficiently rather than kind of instinctively. And I think it was an example of him reacting instinctively. He might retrospectively be like, oh, okay, I'm probably not gonna go to jail for this because I think it was a lawful shooting. But I don't think he's putting the gun out and going, oh, am I going to get away with this or not? Yes, no, making that decision, shooting. But there's a lot of thought processes involved in a very short period of time. I don't think that he's necessarily thinking in those terms personally.
Well, I think he obviously thought it was okay. So he fired the gun 3 times. This like there's instinct, there's intention. Like, how do you define instinct in this sense? If this was based on training, then obviously you could argue that the sort of like decision that was made was incorrect if it was based on training. And I'd still feel like the shooting was wrong, but that's based on American law. I can't do anything about that. But if that isn't the law, then it's a whole different thing altogether, So I think consequentially, I thought he probably thought he'd be fine. He fired his gun 3 times, and then obviously, there are claims that they were standing on his body parts here and there. I don't know how true that is. This is all not speculation, but you can't look at the visuals properly. I think he knew what he was doing. It was a case of whether, like you said, he thought he could get away with it, so to speak. And that's maybe says something about the training,
But is the distinction between him firing 3 times and once relevant?
Yeah, this is what I was asking.
The centre mass, then he's trying to put him down. So I can plausibly imagine myself in a situation where I'm firing a gun at someone in order to kind of like, it's in a me or them situation, pulling the trigger more than once because you're panicking. I don't think 3 times or 1 time really says anything about kind of the intent behind.
Why are you panicking?
I think it.
A taser being pointed at you, whether or not
it's a gun. It's a whole gun.
Hold on. I think the distinction we need to make here is: did he hold it and go boom, 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 or did he go shoot? Saw that he then fell over, was incapacitated. Acknowledged he's incapacitated, and thought, but he's not dead. Shoot, kill. Shoot, definitely kill. That's a very big difference because that's saying I have him now in a situation where I can arrest him because he's injured, but I want to kill him. Or is it, their reaction is to shoot multiple times because of the latent accuracy of the gun. That's
him.
Sorry.
Maybe they need to get some sessions from Jerome and work out because they could have just placed him.
This is part of the problem again. It's like if you don't have to have any physical kind of like exams done after you pass the police force, you do this. So you start off, a guy who's pretty fit. You've done police academy. You come out, you've got a gun, but you probably got a bit of testosterone about you. And that situation, you probably think you can fight him. But 5-6 years into the job, you get a little bit soft around the belly. You're not quite as hard. You sit and eat donuts all the time. But what you do know is on your hip is worst case scenario, get out of jail free card. And this is what I mean is we have to really kind of think about, being in that guy's shoes and experiencing that situation as he did. There are a lot of other nuances to it that kind of, just because I'm not that person, me personally, I probably would have tried to wrestle him to the ground, but I'm bigger than, someone half my size. But, so who am I to assume that say again?
That wasn't worst case scenario though. You said worst case scenario.
No, but again, it's worst case scenario if you're panicking because a taser's been pointed. All I know is if someone points a taser at me, I don't want to get hit with that taser. It's simple as that. Yeah, I do not want to get hit with that taser. Like, you're going down, you don't know what's going to happen next. There's no way of guaranteeing. In the same way that I find it hard to just allow someone to just write the narrative of that, the policeman's mind. I find it hard for you to just guarantee the narrative of Rashard Brooks's mind and saying, oh, he was definitely just going to run away straight away from that. Like, you know, those things, there's no guarantees in anything. So I just think we have to acknowledge that people respond to what their perceived reality at the time. And his perceived reality could well have been, yeah, hold on a sec, he's pointing a taser at me, shit, bang, bang, bang. Now, whether or not that was a good thing, you know, of course it wasn't, because there's a guy dead. But I just think, you know, there's a lot more to it than just sticking with the thread police brutality. And I think that's the only thing that I'm kind of like, I'm just really hesitant and reluctant to kind of just acknowledge and just kind of jump on that sort of bandwagon. I just think it's not helpful.
I think the problem with a lot of these isolated instances is that we don't put them in context of what their day-to-days are. So we're talking about police training, right? And obviously training is to put them in the best situation for the majority of what their work involves. And we're talking about potentially being fitter and being more accurate, that sort of thing. But I think when it comes to ex-police officer in ex-town, where 95% of what he does is either things that are very routine, like traffic stops, jaywalking, all that kind of stuff, or it's a gunfight, where maybe how fit you are, how well trained you are for like nuanced situations or whatever that might be, doesn't really ever come into it, because ultimately it's ever a gun's at you and you have to have a gun to kill them before they kill you. And if they're mostly seeing those situations, the police academy with only this limited amount of funding might think, right, we can make them Navy SEALs, but ultimately if they're in a situation where they're having gun pointing at them, it doesn't matter how fit they are or all these tactics, whatever, it's typically all they need to know is shoot or be shot, because that's what they really experience. I think in this situation, it was complicated. It was obviously, could he have chased him? They shouldn't have been in that position where they lost their taser, all of that stuff. But ultimately, it's either something very simple or, you know, when a gun does come into it, they get shot. It's not that, do you know what I mean? And so maybe if they, in this country, if you don't have a gun, it's more likely that you could make an argument for hand-to-hand combat, because you bring fists to a fist fight. Whereas in that country, it doesn't matter how much training there is in that. If a 15-year-old kid has a gun on you, he's already went up to you, and you're then not trained for the situation, if that makes sense. And obviously they can do both, but maybe it's just a case of priority, I think.
Yeah, but I think in the video, so Rashard aimed the taser at him, turned around, and then started running off. No, he was running anyway. So he was running, aimed the taser. It didn't fire or whatever. It didn't work. We don't know. And he carried on running afterwards. And then he took up the gun. So looking at that, was he going to stop and then shoot the tape? He was going to run off. I hear your point. Like, we don't know if he was going to run off, but based on that behavior, I'm making the assumption he was going to run off. So why shoot? He wasn't under any threat. The police officer wasn't under any threats. He was only under a threat when he got punched in the face, in my opinion. When he got punched in the face, that was under threat. That was direct, you know. But he didn't fire. Okay, it may have stunned him a certain way and been, okay, he was going to taser me or whatever. But it wasn't, it's not the same as a gun. And he didn't even get him.
I was more referring to
training in general. I'm not saying it's right, by the way. I'm just, you know, yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I just meant the training in general. So what I mean to say is they've got this training where they just always shoot on sight. When we pick out these examples, it seems the opposite of what you should be doing and so untrained. But maybe their training actually best suits their circumstances 9 times out of 10. That's what I mean to say. And, you know, if you're in a situation where it's always a gunfight, then that's going to be your conditioned behavior. Even if you did have training in a certain way, you might get 2 weeks into a row and be like, forget all that training. We've all had it in our own workplaces. Forget that training. This isn't what it's like on the day-to-day. Military men, I'm sure they have very sort of uniform training the government signs off on, but they probably all have tricks of the trade of what it actually is like when you get there. Because the people who write these trainings often aren't necessarily people that have been in the field, you know, and so they might have this kind of arrogance that, even if they do get the right training, that, you know, I'm not doing any of that stuff because I know what it's like to be a police officer. And, you know, if you try and speak to them, if you try and de-escalate in all these ways, it doesn't work, they'll shoot you. You see what I mean? So there might be, maybe there needs to be a bit of a close gap between what we expect of them and what their realities are, and a bit more of a conversation to and fro.
The broader narrative of this is like, you know, this is, again, we're jumping on specific events that occur, yeah, where, you know, one interaction between 2 policemen and an individual, it does not, you know, represent an entire police force across the country. You know, it is as mundane an argument as saying a black person stabbing someone with a knife is representative of the entire black community as a whole. It's like literally, it's the same thing. So we're simultaneously arguing that we don't want to be judged by the color of our skin, and doing the same thing by another kind of like, you know, the fact that all police wear blue, all people who wear blue are now like these savage, brutal people, and all the interactions that occur between individuals are, you know, are going to be reaped with like police brutality, and it's just not true, you know. And I think that's where I think, you know, these some of these arguments need to be had. Look, you know, I think, you know, we've all got our own opinions on, you know, what happened and kind of why it happened and how we should look at it. But I think, you know, we do also need to acknowledge that, you know, this is a single incident, and it doesn't necessarily mean it's indicative of everything, you know. And because we have camera phones left, right, and centre, we are going to see more of these things when things go wrong. But no one pulls their phone out to record a police interaction when everything goes right. Yeah, and I guarantee you, if they were, we would not be having these discussions, because we would see a lot more things coming in to kind of give us the counter narrative. You know, I've lost count a number of times. You know, I'll see 50 videos of police doing bad things, and then you get one incidence of, oh, like, you know, this is a policeman doing a good thing. I say that, you know, but and it kind of gives this kind of weird, kind of warped reality in what we perceive as kind of, you know, what's going on out there. And I think that's one thing that we really need to remember, because what's happening now is you've got governors, mayors, you know, public figures all saying police are this, police are that, and police are calling in Atlanta right now. They're calling in sick because they can't strike, yeah, and they're seeing their names and their kind of roles being tarnished, you know, by, you know, some unfortunate incidents that people are just using to kind of like umbrella them all under. And, you know, if police are not roaming the streets and stopping crimes, more crimes will occur. You know, we in this country, Theresa May took money away from police. Knife crime goes up, gun crime goes up. Yeah. So, you know, if you want to bring it to the UK, you know, the reality is you do need law and order in the country. And like, you know, yes, you might need to reform how that's done, and you might need to have a better standard of kind of who you take in. But saying that police brutality means that we should take things away from the police and take funding away from the police, to me, doesn't make any sense. You know, I just think it's such a big leap into from rational to irrational. Yeah, and I think that's. I don't know if anyone else has an opinion.
So what I think is, I get your completely take your point. I think that is true. It's this narrative. But what I think is even worse example of that, I shared a video the other day on Facebook, and it was a combination of police brutality towards white people. But it was actually, the selection of them were kind of things that we've seen in the past. So whether it's just shooting somebody or beating them, or, you know, the kind of things that resonates with us from the black side. And I shared it because I thought, you know, there's quite a big selection here of things I've never seen, but pretty much scale the same way that the popular videos of today would. And I shared the video, and I went back to check on it or something, and it had a censorship. It was grayed over with Facebook censorship, and it was no more violent than any of the videos I've seen. There was no blood, there was nothing else. They were all quite zoomed out, and that really shocked me, because it was saying, not only have I never seen these videos from the mainstream media, this particular video on Facebook has obviously had somebody who's offended by the fact that there's police brutality being pushed on people that are other than black people, obviously reported it, and enough people reported that it got censored. And the fact that, not only police conducting themselves properly, but also police conduct themselves improperly towards non-black people. Not only is it not being shown, it's being censored. And I find that insidious and scary, to be honest.
Yeah, I agree.
That frightens me. And I think the next part of this conversation should really be how things are being shown, Black Lives Matter, the movement, the marketing of all of this. That, again, is definitely something I'm concerned about what I'm seeing right now. Would anyone like to pick up on that?
I don't know if Louise wants to speak. I've got things to say, but I don't know if Louise wants to say something, because I don't know. I feel like you haven't spoken in a while, unless you don't want to.
How has it been shown? Yeah, I just think, for example, there was a video I saw, I think one of you showed me, with that man, I think he was black, I'm not sure. He was videoing this after he spray painted like Black Lives Matter on someone's house. This woman was like, oh, sorry, I know the owner. Can you not spray paint on this person's house? And he was like, what? Are you being racist? Can I get my phone out? Do you want to call the police? Like antagonizing her. It seemed like he wanted to provoke her into saying something bad so that he could film it, so that he could put it out there. really, he made a fool out of himself, hopefully to the majority of people. Maybe not. Maybe people agreed with what he was doing. But I just think the narrative now is just, apparently everyone's a fucking racist.
Okay, so there's a number of points to pick up on. Number one, I think Jerome makes a good point about brutality. We need to be very clear about the language we're using. A lot of this is language. So what is defined as brutality? What's defined as racism? What's defined as discrimination? What's defined as prejudice? What's defined as ignorance? What's defined as willful ignorance? They're all nuances and they're all slightly different in their many different ways. Number two, I hear what you're saying, Jeremy, in terms of what a police officer would do on an average day. However, that does say something about the quality and funding behind training. Is still an important part of it in terms of those situations. It's almost like, I know they don't have the same funding as the American Army, but, you know, I think it was the Willink guy was basically saying he trained every single day, and it was only until like year 10 or 13 or whatever, where he actually fired a gun. But he was training for that situation. So there has to be an intelligent design if they are under stress in terms of the police department. In terms of like, when it comes to what Louise was saying about provoking and everything else, there is a certain sort of sector of society, many people in different ethnicities, that want racism to be a self-fulfilling prophecy, you know. And it's almost like racism exists in 3 different forms. It happens and you're not really aware of it, okay? It happens and you're really aware of it, or you speak about it, you know? And a lot of it's based on people speaking about a racism when a lot of people can't necessarily articulate what that racism is. We keep on hearing institutional racism. Now, for me personally, I need to look at numbers. I think before you make any sort of, you know, judgment or opinion, you need to look at the facts. And if you don't have those numbers, you need to keep quiet. You know, if you've experienced something yourself, then that comes down to language. This is what I have experienced, and this is the evidence qualifying or verifying what I've experienced. Now, I don't know if other people have experienced this, but this is how I felt in this particular space situation, X, Y, and Z. If you can match that with data, then you're in a good situation. It's like, you know, where I work at the moment, you know, for me, I'm making it a big thing to focus on understanding what the makeup is in terms of our organization. Because then we can then see if we want our aims to match, let's say, the aims of the local population or of England, then that can be an aim. And if they don't want to, that's fine, as long as there is a quality and a sense of equity in where you are. Because this is really about, if you go deeply into it, this is about equality or inequality, so to speak. And you could argue that about even racism based on lack of education or beliefs or cultures of a class of people or individuals, X, Y, and Z. But then we don't necessarily look at the other side, which feeds into what Louise is saying in terms about the self-responsibility as well. It's a dual relationship, but we can only do something if we number crunch and we get qualitative events, put those together, and then get a better idea. It's like when you work in a company, you know, some people may use an agile methodology. You have discovery, alpha, beta, all of that kind of stuff. We need to have that sort of approach towards it, I would say anyway, rather than just having this emotion and we feel this way and this is what's happening. And okay, I hear what you're saying. Something bad has happened and I fully get it. But if you really want to make change, you need to make sure you've got your facts correct before you can even try to do anything. Because if you don't, you're going to look silly and you're going to be used as a tool, maybe to get votes, as we're potentially seeing right now, maybe to, cover up something else that's happening outside. And there's all these different things that come into play, and so I just think we need to be, I don't know if disciplined or mature or more rational. I don't know what is the right word, but we need to not, maybe we need to look, if we're going to use emotion, we need to channel it the right way with the right tools and devices.
So I've got quite a controversial stance on racism altogether, but one that I feel very passionate about. For me, when we talk about racism, we talk about definitions, all these other things. it seems to me that people really want to almost like it's with religion. People really want to cherry pick with racism. Like for me, it seems that 9 out of 10 times people want racism. They're happy with racism, whether that's through the comic use of other people's stereotypes. So, God, they love. One of my biggest pet peeves is watching a comedy movie nowadays. Every other line is a white joke, and it doesn't even fit into it. It's just this, like, almost, whether it's white guilt or that's just what people like to put their thumbs up to. It's just fitting it in there. Or, you know, if it's a stereotype about Chinese people, Indian people, whatever the group might be, it works. And that's just an example of being negative or comical about it. There's also this thing of don't be colorblind, that's racist. See my blackness, appreciate my culture, know that this is what I have to do to my hair, this is where I come from. Educate yourself about my background. Africa isn't just, you know, the water aid adverts. Educate yourself about what Africa is, all these things, understand my culture better. But then why can't we look into the as you say, the statistics and facts around what Black culture in America and sometimes in the UK can be around, you know, homicide and murder and theft? For me, racism only gets perpetuated as long as it's true, but we only have a problem with it when it's obsessing to us, and that I find infuriating. Like for me, if the true racism stopped being true, it wouldn't exist anymore. I.e., if, for example, Black people stop committing crimes, and obviously I'm not saying stop committing altogether, but if they committed them at the same rate as everybody else did, that stereotype would go away. Now, weaponized racism, I think, is a very real problem. And I think that's to do with incarceration rates, and that definitely exists. Institutional racism definitely exists. But just racism as a thing of itself isn't this evil concept. It's not this religion. It's just a way to categorize a group of people. And that can be weaponized to a certain group of people that you want to put in a certain position for economic gain, media, whatever it is. But racism isn't an issue when it's comedy or when it's culture. You can see people for your color when it suits you, but not when it doesn't. And that's what upsets me. And there's just no part of this conversation from BLM or anybody else on the Liberal side about, okay, we have this racism about theft and murder, but are there also the theft and murder going on? There's no conversation about it. It's just not spoken about. It's just we're seen and judged unfairly. But is it unfair if we're saying that you can generalize on a group of people?
It's the media.
I think I have a new policy now where if I hear someone, a white person, white liberal kind of argument that, you know, my implicit biases and my privilege means that, you know, I'm going to have advantages over you and I'm part of a system that suppresses you, I'm going to call them a white supremacist. Yeah, because if you think that your whiteness, yeah, qualifies you to have any agency over me and what I can achieve in life, you think that your whiteness makes you supreme. Go fuck yourself, yeah? Because as far as I'm concerned, yeah, I want to have agency on my own life. I don't want your fucking sympathy. I don't want your handouts. I want you to leave me alone and be part of an actual rational discussion, yeah? And I'm so sick and tired of hearing these fucking idiots, yeah? When I go on TV and I see white people kneeling on the ground and saying, I will embrace my white you're basically saying, I'm embracing my white supremacy. You're a bunch of dickheads. I'm sorry. I'm so sick of it. And I know I don't want to be like this inflammatory person, but it's actually the most jarring thing in the world. And, you know, and some of the most racist shit I have heard, yeah, is stuff said to Black people who have counter narratives to this media Black Lives Matter thing. As soon as you don't agree with them, and it's Black people on Black people, that's the irony of it. Yeah, you get the
crazy. You're not a real Black person.
I mean, the fact that you think that the color of my skin defines what I think, what I feel, and my experiences, yeah, that is racist. That is racist. Yeah, and until somebody presents a narrative that comes away from those two things, I do not want to hear it anymore. I'm so sick and tired of it, and I think that I'm literally watching, you know, the world, the kind of lowest common denominator become, you know, the norm. I feel like we should be coming upwards. We should be elevating people. So you saying something controversial and you not liking it because it's a harsh reality, like, I just think we should stop being tolerant on all this shit, and people should just grow backbones and stop kind of like falling under the pressure of silence is violence. No, silence is a virtue. I was always taught silence is a virtue because that's how you hear shit. That's how you understand stuff. Yeah. Silence is not violence. Violence is violence. Yeah. So when you see people throwing shit at police women and knocking them off their horses, call it for what it is. That's violence. Yeah, don't say, oh well, those black people, they can't help it, they need to do it. No, I don't want your sympathy. Fucking hold them to the same standard that you would hold white people. Yeah, hold them to the same standard you'd hold everyone, because we do need a colorblind society. That's what we need. Yeah, you can embrace parts of your culture. Yeah, your culture and your color are not two different things, because if you come from, East London and you're a black person, your culture is going to be very different from fucking Suki walking around in Africa. Like, it's not, you're not the same. Yeah, so stop defining us by the color of our skin. It's people doing it, simultaneously going, oh, we want to be judged on our merit of our character. So yeah, me too. So talk some sense. I'm sorry, I know that's a rant, but yeah.
That was good. I liked it.
I think, Louise, why don't you?
I was going to say about the snowflake.
Candice.
I was going to say, we live in a snowflake generation. We do. Everyone's just like, let me just tiptoe around. Let me just go on social media. And if 20 people have liked it, but one person has disagreed, even if I disagree with them, even if I agree with the one person that disagreed, no, I've agreed now. That's what the majority thinks. So that's what I'm going to think as well. And it's like, I've had so many examples of this at uni. Uni is just some liberal mind game. Everyone just wants to think the same. No one wants to have a different narrative. I remember sitting in a bar with this boy, and they were asking, the question was, oh, what political party do you support? And I said, oh, I support Conservative Party. And this boy he literally went to me, oh my God, thank God you said that. I was going to say I support Liberals, but now I can say I support Conservative because you did as well. Like, it's a joke. Like, we just, have your own opinions. Think for yourself. Don't just go on social media and say, okay, fine, this is what the majority of people think, so I'm going to think it as well. No, people need to have their own minds. They need to have their own brains. They need to develop themselves as individuals instead of just being this mindless herd. And I feel like that's what people are teaching their children to be like.
Do you know what? I heavily agree with that. And part of what I do as a high performance coach and all of this other stuff that I do is to teach people to focus on thinking for themselves. How they're able to define their own value system so they understand what is important for themselves, but also be able to think critically in order for them to understand what that is. And you're right, we are in a snowflake generation, as Piers Morgan says. We are too scared to think to ourselves. We don't take any sort of form of responsibility. We like the fact that there are leaders really basically mind controlling us and not able to allow you to think for yourself. But that is permitted based on what you've allowed them to do. It's not because they've done it, it's because you've done that to yourself. And we want to blame, parents and everything X, Y, and Z. And yes, biology would support some of that, but you have your own rational mind. So you can overcome those things. You choose not to because you fear the change that you have to make. And so if we're coming back to this original argument, for me personally, what's the solution for all of this? Focus on yourself, focus on your friends, focus on your family. That's it. That's what I've come, that's the conclusion for me. Because at the end of the day, when you get too absorbed in all of this stuff, I feel like you lose yourself. You may even think to yourself that actually I don't really agree with this, but I'm so deep right now that I can't really get out of it. Do you know what I mean? What is that nonsense? Focus on yourself, yeah? Focus on your friends, you don't even have to focus on your friends if you don't want to. Focus on yourself and your family. But because at the end of the day, like, I believe human motivation is based on pain and pleasure, okay? Or self-preservation. When it comes into the workplace, yeah, everyone seems nice and everything else, but the quality of their self-preservation varies on how much of a dickhead they are, yeah? If it gets to a situation where it becomes really dire or they have to sort of like protect their job or whatever, self-preservation is going to reign. It always does. They're going to put you in the shits in order to do what they need to do. Now, I'm not saying necessarily be selfish. I'm saying logically, it makes sense to focus on yourself. That you change a society one person at a time. Whether it's a nuclear family, whether it's improving the quality of how you are as a person, or it's thinking for yourself, understanding your value systems, what you truly do believe. That for me is the change that needs to happen. Not a lot of these distractions.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think to touch on what you said about, the kind of pain and pleasure thing, I think we kind of all have, I think we have rings of utility. So kind of your first utility is kind of maximizing your own kind of what you get out of things. Now the second ring is, like you said, your family and your close relatives, yeah? And so you actually gain utility from maximizing their utility. Now, the next thing around that is your friends, then the next thing around that is your local community, then you've got your country, then you've got the world, yeah? And it's almost like people are going, right, you've got you, and now I want you to just circumvent all the rest of it and just focus on the world. And it's like, that's not how human beings work, yeah? And so you can start off talking like that. And I think when you're young, it's very easy to kind of fall into the utopia of going, oh, this is what we need in life. But realistically, if you start from inwards and work outwards and everybody's doing it, then, again, the lowest common denominator starts to go this way, yeah? If you start trying to make these kind of like massive mental leaps, yeah? And it makes you look good, but it doesn't make things happen. Like nothing occurs. And I think, and the irony is when you say things like that, and I've heard perfectly rational people say these things and then go, yeah, but conservatives are wrong. I would never vote Republican. It's like, no, like that is the forefront of the Republican viewpoint. Yeah, it's like, I don't really give a shit about you, but I just want to be able to get on with my own stuff and hopefully everyone else can get along fine. And then on the other side, you've got the Democrats going, I just want to be your feeder. I want to have this, hold the hand and the spoon that feeds you, and I want to look after you because that way you're my slave. And it's like, what do we want to do? Do we want to be slavery to kind of like our dependence on people, or do we want to be, free agents and have, control of our own lives? And I think, that's all really kind of anybody really wants. And I just think we should just stop kind of, trying to dance around, look like the nice person and just acknowledge it. There's nothing wrong with just being a bit selfish every now and then.
So I think let's bring up then the recent reaction to Candace Owens then. And I'm blown away because you told me about her, Jerome. You told me some of these reactions. The visceral reaction I got from posting one video about her from friends and family about evil and disgusting and sunken place and all these pop culture references just by the mere side of her face really shocked me. You see some people who don't quite agree with her in certain circles saying, oh, this is a sister trying to be kind of raise her stock and, she's intelligent, listen to her. You see some people defend her, but by and large, it's just this sort of hatred. And for me, one of the biggest things was when someone like Kanye West, a massive icon of African-American culture, was disowned from kicking out the circle. I kind of thought nobody's got a chance. So it wasn't too surprising in that sense, but just the hate for people like her really sort of scares me. And I've kind of started in this week, to be honest with you, lost a lot of faith in people and getting anywhere anytime soon. So yeah, what do you guys make of being black and having ideals outside of this in your social communities, online, all that sort of stuff?
No, think for yourself. That's the rule. Think for yourself, and sorry to carry on. Just think for yourself, and if you're going to formulate any sort of ideals or opinions, it needs to be backed by something. That's all I'm saying. And then you can make your. If it's just an emotional reaction, I don't know. So that's what I would say. Like, think for yourself.
No, I agree. Okay. The first sign of somebody who has a flawed argument is when they attack your character rather than your point. And I think Candace Owens is, whilst I can understand how sometimes her delivery can come across as quite callous, and I think she, there is obviously elements sometimes of a little bit clickbaity behavior, but then also sometimes I just define it as passion. I think, when you get really frustrated, like me, like 5 minutes ago, you just become a little less tolerant of the kind of like, oh, I'm gonna say this in a nice way. And you say it in ways that become a little bit more like hard and sharp and scratchy. But I've watched countless interviews between her and people on the other side, and there's not many because a lot of them don't want to debate her because they realize what's going to happen, and they just never answer her points, and then you kind of get a review on the debate, and it's just like, oh, Candace this, Candace that, she's a bad person, this, she's a bad person that, and I wonder how many people have sat and actually listened to more than the 30 seconds that you get on a media clip on CNN, and actually gone, oh, like, do I genuinely disagree with her points? Yeah. Or am I judging her by what I've been told by the media? Am I thinking for myself, or am I thinking based on what everybody else has been saying to me? And, it's the same thing as, am I basing my opinions on the headline of an article or the content of an article? And it's the same thing. And, we've moved into the media age where we can just watch videos rather than read books. And we've kind of just, all the bad habits that we had from there, we've just switched into, social media and YouTube. And that's the thing that scares me, is I think, and I just want to shout out, there's a video called Uncle Tom that's come out by Larry Elder. It's a film, basically. And it basically touches on all this and how every kind of main Black conservative has just basically been outcast from the Black community and dismissed as an Uncle Tom. And I think, and it's probably one of the worst things holding Black people down at the moment, and minorities down, is the fact that dissenting views are kind of outcast rather than embraced. And it starts in universities, where you teach people about safe spaces, and you kind of say, students should be protected from things that hurt their feelings. It's like the real world does not work that way, and we need to prepare people for the real world, and that includes hearing things that you don't like, and that is the kind of the fundamentals of free speech and what we need. And that's why these discussions are like important, because these sort of things really need to be spoken about. And I think that they're, whilst we're kind of on that gravy train of the Black Lives Matter thing, and you jump on it, it's very difficult to get off, because if you get off at any point, no, they'll come for you. They will come for you. So, and that's so it's a difficult one, but I think I've seen a lot of mischaracterization of Candace Owens, and and a lot of other kind of Black people who are just saying things that are hard to argue with.
Yeah, Louise?
I think, yes, I agree, but I think the issue is, if you agree with Candace, you don't have to agree with everything Candace says. It's not Candace says this, fact, and it's not BLM says this, fact. It's, you can take both. You can pick points that you agree with, and you can pick other points that you agree with. It's not a side. You don't have to be on a specific side.
Yeah.
So my issue with her, the only issue with her is I feel like she's created her own side.
Politics.
So she's very much like, I don't know if she's so caught up in what she's saying that she can't ever say anything against, her own narrative.
Yeah.
Or like this Black conservative narrative. But yeah, I just think you need to hear both sides of the argument and then formulate your own opinion. Again, it's your own opinions. It's not just Candace Owens says that, so it must be true. So that's my opinion now. My opinion is Candace's, not my own. Yeah. And it's not. I'm trying to think of a BLM person right now. Gone out of my mind.
PI is an example.
What's that name? That guy? Oh, I can't remember.
Michael said TI, but literally anybody.
It's not. It's not this celebrity or TI says this, so that's my opinion now. And it's again, these idols, they can control you. It's just, they're like gods. Apparently everything they says is the word of God.
So,
I think people go
on, Jeremy.
I was going to say that's a really, really good point. I think Jerome touched on it a little bit as well, to say that people just don't want to think for themselves anymore. It's either a newspaper, a political party, or whatever, so that they can go, right, instead of thinking about all these nuanced topics that come up in my life, everyone else's life, let me just subscribe to people to do all the thinking, all aspects of life for me. And it's just the easier kind of way to do it. It's familiar, it's clear, you don't have to be in this confusion, you have camaraderie around of it. So it's understandable people do that, but as you say, it completely stops you from forming your own opinions, because, as soon as you have to deviate, you feel kind of pushed out of that group. I also wonder what you guys think about all of this. I see a lot of people, our peers or people in the media, saying, you don't understand our pain over the last couple of weeks. You don't understand. And I'm thinking, what is your pain? And as a human being, to see somebody so brutally murdered, I get that pain. What is your pain about the general afflictions of Black people in all these situations, just because you have to Black in a completely different set of situations? And also, why is that pain not felt with the far more brutal murders in far higher numbers of Black people in Africa and in low economic parts of the country? I'm sure if a gangster was needing someone's head because he didn't pay him the drug money in time, we wouldn't be crying over it, because that happens every day.
So I just wanted to quickly go back to the Candace Owens things and come on to this. So what makes Candace Owens so polarizing and effective in a negative or positive sense is that it appears that she's done her homework, and that comes down to the fact that she's always sprouting out numbers. Yeah, she's always talking about, you know, the highest percentage of, you know, absent fathers is in black men at 70-odd%, blah, 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 blah. She does that. Now, if you haven't done the right reading around the subject, you're not going to really have a good opinion. So you fall back on your emotions, you know, you have an emotional response behind that. And so if there was somebody who matched her back with numbers or looked at the same sort of stuff that she's apparently looked at, then that would be a more sort of like interesting sort of conversation or debate. But a lot of these conversations have just been, you know, based on experience or what they think or theory, X, Y, and Z. So yeah, that's that point. In terms of your point there, so for me personally, the afflictions that I have faced have been based on the fact that I witnessed a guy get murdered on YouTube, pretty much. That's it though, you know. I haven't. Okay, I've had racist events where people have called me names with intent and all this kind of stuff there, but I haven't really taken it on a certain way. I've just kind of like brushed it off. It now doesn't define my every action or move in life, you know? And so it comes back to this emotional charging. If people have genuinely experienced these things, then they need to be able to articulate in a way where they can show this, and then maybe there can be some sort of direction towards it. But like I said, there's this mystery around this. You know, I can't really see that articulated or defined in a certain way. What I can do, and you'll see this theme with me all the time, I can look at numbers though. I can go to gov.uk and check all of the statistics around this stuff, or ONS data, and see what that's saying. And then I could say, okay, there's an inequality here, and it's more specific to this ethnicity. This supports what these people are saying. But if it's just a charged thing based on a polarized media creation or invention, so to speak, for whatever alternative motives that I believe, then I can't be prey to that, because I become a slave to that brainwashing. I think a lot of this is down to what the media wants us to think. It comes down to that. And so if you don't have a strong and resilient mind, you're going to fall prey to these oppressions and afflictions, and the ability for us not to progress. And it's working, because we're part of the lower denominator when it comes to the socioeconomic, you know, quartile in that sense. It's working. We need to think for ourselves, as stated before.
But I think, again, I just want to draw back to the last point you made, and the point I made before is there is so much variety, but like within the melanin on your skin. Like you have black skin. Yeah, some people are rich and some people are poor. If you break them down into demographics, first and second generation African immigrants do actually pretty well. So these are people who are coming to this country, they're well educated, they have strong familial units, and, you know, whether it's like within the main family or kind of surrounding family, and they do quite good, you know. And then you have other areas of black communities where, you know, third and fourth generations that are kind of more tied, you know, to like the Windrush side. Yeah, you know, that they came during a time where discrimination was a genuine, like, it was much bigger of a thing, and that has had an effect. It genuinely has an effect. But, like, you know, again, it comes down to not just painting us all under one brush, you know, like,
yeah.
And at that point, you know, we can start to have actual kind of conversations, because then you know, if you go, these people who have come a lot later, it indicates that actually, so the time that we're living within and now is not as bad as the time that we lived within. But for some people, they're trying to make these arguments, oh, it's just as bad as it was then. It's like, no, it really isn't. Like, come on, like, let's be realistic about that, you know. And again, like you said, to another point you said about, you know, kind of you've had overt racial things happen to you. Like, so have I. You know, I've had those happen to me, but, like, you know, I choose not to let that define me. I kind of, like, you know, if I always go by the thing, if someone says something racist to me and I go to bed upset, yeah, that guy will carry on about his day and not give a shit within 5 minutes. Yeah, but if I go to bed upset, he's not the winner. Do you know what I mean? You know, and I can then choose to kind of like browbeat him and call him this, call him that, call him anything. And I've never seen anyone get browbeaten out of racism. I mean, I've yet to see that happen, which I find, which is one of the most kind of annoying things about what's going on now, is that we've created this really poisonous kind of like, let's just call everyone arseholes, this, that, and the other. As soon as we think they're even a bit racist, let's shame them publicly and ruin their lives and reputations. It's like that is not going to help anything. And I think, you know, it's a very funny one, because, you know, experiencing overt racism, you know, these people I'm experiencing it from are kind of like the lowest elements of society. They're the people who, you know, get ostracized publicly by the media and people like that. You know, they turn up at protests and they get called and ridiculed as like racial people. They don't have any power over me. You know, what I'm concerned with is the people that do have kind of like that do have, you know, elements of control in my life, and whether those people are racist. And to me, I see evidence of things getting better, not worse. And I think this kind of narrative that's going on now could potentially pull that backwards and not forwards. And I think, you know, it is something we need to discuss. And I think that the positives of all of this is that there is more discussion occurring. But, you know, the main thread and the underlying thread of the Black Lives Matter movement, they're not as a whole, because I don't want to tie everyone under one brush. I don't want to be guilty of my own point. But, like, you know, the one that kind of I'm seeing, you know, the silence is violence, you know, ostracizing people, the really kind of broad definition of what rape is racist, I think is really, really not taking us anywhere good. So,
and I just want to add, like, quickly, I just think everyone needs to know that it's okay to change your mind. You can watch a Candace Owens video and agree with her, and your life won't be over. Your friends won't hate you. You won't be, you know, acid on social media. Like, it's okay. It's okay to have one opinion and then change it if you can change for a good reason.
Yeah.
You know, I just feel like what you were saying, Joe, about the gravy train, like, it's scary how hard it is for people to, like, realize that they can get off it if they want to. They can. It's not by force. It's really not by force.
It's not by force. Yeah, no, I definitely hear you, man. I just, yeah, I think it's yeah, I don't know what I'm saying here. I think I'm just coming back to the same points. Like, people just need to support themselves with the right information in the first place. You know, go on, Jeremy.
I think one of the problems with this is that anybody who has any real influence, i.e. in the media or politics, or even socially as an influencer, let's say, you don't get any credibility unless, one, you can be endorsed by a group big enough of like-minded people with a clear aim, or you stick to something. So, for example, if you're a politician and you say, I have these politics, and then some new issue comes up and you side on a different group, you're no longer endorsed and put on the face of that particular group. Therefore, you haven't got the ability to influence anyone. So it happens to a lot of politicians. They have a core group of beliefs they want to put forward, but to ride to that top of a platform, they've got to attach themselves to a group, and then ultimately they give up half their values so they can stay relevant, you know. And there's not really any other way around that, unless you're sort of got your own YouTube channel and, you know, you've got a group of really like-minded or really open-minded followers. Like, maybe a Joe Rogan is probably the best example we got of it, who are willing just to listen to you because there's no bullshit and you can fund your own platform. It's not going to happen. You've got to attach yourself to a group that's funded by somebody with an agenda. This is
where the self-preservation thing, it supports what you're saying. But, you know, it comes down to the values, you know. If you are against something but you're supporting it based on the fact that you're going to get social clout or whatever, then your internal value system is saying that's wrong. You know, it doesn't, I'm not saying that people change that, but in my opinion, you should follow your value system.
Yeah.
You know, that's how I see it. And people are scared to be honest to themselves because of the perceived fears or consequences that may arise from that. You know, if we had more people, you know, being honest with themselves, less of this crap would happen, you know, in my personal opinion. And there'd be more sort of like opportunity to have real open discussion. You know, some people get emotional about certain things, but imagine if they're like, actually, I don't really know all the facts. So let me read up on the facts first, talk to the right people, and then I'll come back to you. Can you imagine how many, maybe even potentially deaths could be saved if that happened?
Yeah.
Why are they just so stuck in their social bubbles. Like people just don't want to be unique. Everyone just wants to be the same.
I think people do. I think people do actually want to be unique. They're too scared to. So they're like, oh, what's the point?
Well, they give eloquence and give me points. It's like, cool, I'm all for it. You know, I think that's we're such a kind of visually stimulated society now that, you know, it's very surface level. And I think, you know, it's you know, we're moving downwards and kind of adjusting to the lowest common denominator rather than trying to pull that upwards. You know, and I think it's ironically, you're becoming less unique by doing so. So
one of the things I was kind of hoping as a positive to come out of the coronavirus is it was for one time the globe, like on a global scale, we had a common enemy. And I thought it was starting to show some sort of signs of let's work together, camaraderie, let guys stop sucking up on things, blah, 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 blah. But then very soon it became China versus America, black people at risk, all these. We almost need like a fake group of people for everyone to hate and be us versus them against. This has galvanized us a little bit. Like everyone is against something. It's just against something very important for society called the police. But
funny, you know, I'm not against the police, you know, at all. I'm more against, you know, the people, so to speak, and what's happened.
I want to be safe, Frankie. Like we need them.
Female police officer went to go get some like McDonald's quickly after her shift, and then she was just stuck waiting in the line for like 10, 15, 20 minutes, whatever was going on. And they only brought out the coffee of her order after a certain amount of time. She just started crying and like she just said, just don't worry about it. She was so scared. Like she even went into McDonald's with this mindset of like, people hate me so much, I'm not even gonna get my food. Then time goes on and she's saying, I'm playing these mind games in my head. I'm so anxious now. People hate me. I can't even be sure that I'll get my McDonald's order if I go for lunch. And I haven't eaten since whenever, but I still drove out of there. Yeah.
The crazy thing, is one of the funny things is the same people, when we talk about the whole Brexit debate, they were kind of like, you know, some people saying we need to get rid of the European Union completely and just completely start again. And you had people going, no, we need to sort it out from within and stay in it so that we can be part of the reform. Yeah. These are the same people going, let's just defund the police. Let's get rid of them. We need to get rid of it. You know, it makes absolutely no sense. You know, if you wanted to find a way to make sure police is going to be less diverse, make them the enemies of black people, because how many black people are going to wake up and go, do you know what I fancy doing? Being a policeman. Yeah, it's just not going to happen. And so, you know, and what we need to do is get more people and get more diverse people and kind of like be like, you know, this needs to be a relationship between communities and actually invite people in. You know, no one in their right mind is thinking, I want to be a policeman when I grow up right now, because, and so you're going to get, you know, the lowest thread of people. You know, it's like a lot of people come out with no job prospects and then go, oh, fuck it, I'll be a policeman then. You know, do we want that?
Yeah.
Or do we want people...
Ironic, or white supremacists, because they're being told that's the right job for white supremacists.
Yeah.
So, do you know what I mean?
Yeah, no.
They're told that's where to go.
It's sometimes, you know, I always draw it back to, I remember, you know, when you think about parties like the, you know, the EDL and stuff like that, I think, you know, once you label a group, you know, whether rightly or wrongly, the kind of group for racists, well, it's like an open invitation for racists to fucking start knocking at the door. It doesn't make any sense. You know, you're kind of giving them a place to go where they're going to start speaking with their like-minded friends. You know, it's like, here, come here, you know, and so, you know, and then when they amass in numbers, they have something called political strength. And you know, so the irony is, you know, we need to actually kind of stop just blanketing people and kind of actually start having like nuanced arguments and debates. So, but anyway, should we wrap it up a little bit then, guys?
I was thinking the same.
But the Rashard Brooks thing is interesting, and it's you know, it's definitely one I think I'm not I want to be more of a bendy tree on. I think that, you know, because there's some good points made. But yeah, no, it's good, and yeah, I think Louise, the point you made about it's okay to change your mind and not have your own opinion, I think was very, very profound. I'm glad that you're at university being that person and not one of the
person that's like, come on, people.
It's good. I'm happy that I've got that over my family rather than being the kind of the only one being like that. So it's nice.
Yeah, for sure. It's got to be normalized, and I think hopefully these conversations, what they can be, is just a couple of people nodding along and agreeing to some stuff and being a bit more outspoken themselves. But we'll have to see.
Yeah, I just wanted to spark critical thinking. That's all. You know.
Yeah, exactly.
Of anything.
All right.
Peace. See you later, guys.
See you guys.